What are you looking for?
Okay, it's fine. You can let your phone there. I didn't know if you were trying to say something.
Sometimes it gets colder in here, so I usually just write it.
No, it's fine. I don't know if you thought they were here by now.
All right, guys. Can I get your attention, please? All right. Tighten it up in the back room. Jane Presley, get on out of here. I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet. If you don't mind, we're asking for your name, email, phone number. If not, that's no big deal. But we really like to try to keep in contact with people. So I'll start this over here. Just so we're all on the same page, this is a family recovery meeting. If you're here and you're in recovery yourself, that's perfectly fine. We would ask you if you share or if you wind up talking at all, you kind of do it from the family perspective. And if you share anything, it's more about trying to help the family members along with this process. Sometimes when we get in recovery rooms, those of us in recovery like to talk a lot. We love to tell our stories. And that's good if it benefits the family in understanding what's going on with this issue. This is all about helping the family wrap their mind around this problem and developing some skills and some ways to move forward with it. My name's Rich Jones. I'm the CEO here at Favor. I think I know everyone, but real quick, just tell you a little bit about my background. I have a master's degree in social psychology. I have an MBA. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist, a certified Arise interventionist, a certified employee assistance professional, certified substance abuse professional, a certified clinical supervisor, and certified in all these other things that you got to get certified in that allow you to talk to people about these issues. But I'm also a person in long-term recovery myself. So for me, it's been 16 years. My story involved primarily alcohol. Started drinking when I was 14 years old. Moved into other things, messed around with other things. It was a different world then. This is back in the day when marijuana was still a drug. Believe it or not. Back before it became legal and it became innocent. And someone came up with the term medical marijuana. And so messed around with different things, that kind of stuff. But in 1999, I was in a car accident, and I began to receive prescription opioids. And basically any kind of pain pill that I could get my hands on, I did. And I never bought them from the street. I never got them anywhere except from doctors. And I became hopelessly 100% addicted to these things. And, I probably would have continued to drink. I probably would have continued to party, that kind of thing. But this stuff took me to my knees. And so I entered into recovery in 2001, and thank God I've been able to maintain that to this point. Went back and became a therapist, all that kind of stuff. I also deal with this in my family, guys. This has touched, I've lost 3 first cousins as a direct result of addiction. 1 to alcohol, 2 to opioids. Now, I have a lot of cousins. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters. I don't know if I ever mentioned that. I might be related to some of you and not know. I guess what I'm saying is I'm no stranger to this thing from a theoretical, academic, training standpoint, and I'm no stranger to this thing from a lived point of view. I know what it's like to put my family through hell. I know what it's like to put my mom through hell. I've shared in here before that I'm on this journey, and my mom comes and visits the last week of October to hang out for a while and stuff like that. And the pain that I put her through, and the anxiety and the fear and the leaving on Friday and her not knowing what was going to happen to me. And this is back in the day before you could get a hold of anybody. I don't know whether this is good or bad, but it's before cell phones, right? So when I used to go out and do my shenanigans, nobody could text me continuously to see where I was. Nobody could, maybe they could call a landline if they sort of knew who I was with, but for the most part, she had to do what? Just kind of cross her fingers, sit back and pray and hold on. I almost feel like it's more difficult today. Constant contact with our kids, constant contact with the people that we love may not be a good thing. I heard there was this app, and I think it came up in here, that there was an app that you could get that would actually tell you when all your people, if you programmed it in, they would tell you when all your kids and all your loved ones were safe in the house. Why in the hell would you want to do that to yourself? Why would you want to put yourself through that? You'd be looking at that app all night. So-and-so's not in, so-and-so's not in. You're never disconnected from the problem. You're always going to have the ability to reach out and send that text message. And when your loved one doesn't get back to you, what happens? You get this feeling, right? Kind of in the pit of your stomach. Your heart sinks. And you go to this automatic, kind of worst case scenario thinking. So tonight we're going to talk about, and I believe one of the reasons why we go through that, those of us who are parents who've dealt with this in any kind of way, spouses who've dealt with it, worried about their husband or wife, brothers or sisters who've dealt with it. One of the reasons is because rather than kind of a codependency construct, I think what it is it's a trauma-related construct. Trauma is a natural, it's not a natural response. Actually, it is a natural response to an unnatural situation. It's a conditioned response that you really don't have control of. So when that phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning and you jump, if that happens to you, and you wonder, you immediately go, that's your brain literally kicking into fight or flight. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about you guys recognizing what's going on and also trying to figure out ways to manage that. Because here's what you want to do. If your brain is in fight or flight, So, and it's this part of the brain right here. This part of the brain right here. When it kicks into fight or flight, it's very hard to think clearly. When you start thinking with the emotional part of your brain, it's very hard to think clearly. And when you're reacting emotionally, what tends to happen? What tends to happen, guys, when you react emotionally? Bad decisions. Who said that? I mean, bad decisions. You start saying things you wish you would have never said. You start making threats that you're not sure whether you can follow through on or not. If you do that again, you're out of this house. If I find out this is happening again, I'm pulling you out of school. I did the whole I'm pulling you out of school stunt. It was a very impulsive, not well thought out, counterproductive solution to the immediate crisis, and it actually wound up causing more problems than it would have if I'd have thought it through. So the deal is to try to get us to identify that we have this going on so that we can think, and we can try to think strategically about these situations. I was talking about this earlier today with a new recovery coach class that we have going in, and it sounds crass and it sounds cold to say this, but if you're dealing with a loved one who's in addiction or any stage of recovery, early recovery that is, you want to be strategic about how you respond. It's almost like you want to think of it as a business strategy. If he does this, I do this. If they do this, I do this. Because if you go on emotion, it's going to eat you up. It's going to put you through the grinder. So tonight's objective is to try to get us to look at this from the big picture standpoint. Any questions or comments right off the bat regarding that? All right, the first thing we do, because we're never going to take it for granted that everybody in the room knows and is speaking the same language. Let's talk about what the difference between addiction and heavy partying is. So not everybody who parties hard is addicted. Would you guys agree with that? So about 25% of Americans meet criteria for what used to be called substance abuse, which is now called substance use disorder moderate. Okay? Now you know. I don't know why you ever want to know that, but now you know. It's no longer called substance abuse. It's substance use disorder moderate. And about 25 to 35% of Americans meet criteria for that. Most of them are found where? College campuses. You know, some people would say about 50% of any given college population meets criteria for substance use disorder moderate. That doesn't mean that they've crossed the line into what's called substance use disorder severe. And I'm going to talk about how do you try to make that judgment. But I want to let you know, this is not a scientific process, guys. There's no x-ray for when a person became addicted. You guys get that? It's very hard. It's the hardest thing about my job. The hardest thing about my job is to try and help people really, really see, have you crossed that line or have you not crossed that line? Here are the consequences, here are the criteria. Consequences related to use. Tolerance, it takes more and more to get the same effect. Withdrawal, when you don't have it, you experience some type of sickness. Craving is an internal process. It would be impossible for you guys to know whether your loved one's going through craving, but it's this ongoing preoccupation with getting a hold of it. Inability to cut down is I'm only going to do this on the weekends, or I'm only going to do it 2 or 3 times a week. Inability to control is when I go out, I'm only going to have 3 drinks and I wind up having 33 drinks. Physical danger, using like drinking and driving would be a really good example of that. You spend a great deal of time using, that's straightforward. You have work or school problems related to it. You only go to social activities that involve alcohol or drugs. And you have interpersonal problems. Mom, dad are upset, boyfriend, girlfriend upset. If you meet 6 of those, if there's a pattern over a 12-month period where you meet 6 of those, you are substance use disorder severe. All right? That's about as close as we can get with making a judgment on whether or not a person has crossed the line over the line into addiction. How do we find this out? We have to talk to the person. We do a long, drawn-out kind of assessment. We don't do this at Favor because we believe it's not really our job. We're not a clinical service. We want to talk to you whether you meet that criteria or not. Does that make sense? We want to get you in the door, and we want to talk to you whether you meet that criteria or not, because even if you don't meet that criteria, we believe talking about this issue will help. You're going to hear a theme tonight, guys, and it's all about communication, and it's all about trying to break through the stigma and actually get this thing out in the open and have some conversations about it. Most of the time where addiction is concerned, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it as an individual, we don't talk about it as a family, and we certainly don't talk about it as a community. What kind of stuff gets in the way of talking about it?
Fear.
Fear. Fear of what?
Fear of the consequences of what's going to be thrown back at you.
Fear of the way the person's going to react, right? One of the main so you could have somebody that you're thinking about right now, or you can go back in time and think about your experience with your loved one, and you may have kept your mouth shut in terms of saying something, and a lot of times it's because we have a lot of fear on how the person's going to react. Because how do people react in these situations? Defensive. And it can get defensive in a very angry kind of way. How many people have experienced that? Like we will sometimes lash out. Get out of my face. You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. You need help. Dude, I just saw you. You just snorted an 8-ball Coke off the back of that toilet. You're crazy. You're the one that needs help. Why me? You're the one snorting Coke off the toilet. And so you got to remember that the person is coming from. I can't believe I just said that. The person is coming from a very irrational point of view. And so they'll lash out. Sometimes people will, so you got the one thing is fear, intimidation, defensiveness. What are some other things? I heard somebody say it, denial. The denial process that the person will enter into, and how they will explain away that this isn't the issue that you think it is. Oh, don't worry about it. Everybody drinks like this. Come on, man. Don't worry about it. Everybody uses like this. It's not as big of a deal as you think it is. It's not as bad as you think it is. And then you'll kind of enter into this debate, and many times they'll kind of talk you into believing that. Do you think? What's one of the reasons why when we're in active addiction, and remember, I'm in recovery. I have done all these tricks. I have pulled all these tricks on people who love me. What's one of the reasons why we're very successful into talking you into thinking it's not a big deal?
We talk ourselves.
Yes, because we're telling you what you want to hear. When we tell you how it's not a big deal, what we're doing is psychologically, you guys are able to say, okay, maybe it isn't what I think it is. Maybe it's not as bad, that kind of thing. So we tap into that. We actually literally tap into the same sense that you want to hear. We tell you what you want to hear in a situation like that. So you got denial, you got fear, fear of defensiveness. What other kind of things get in the way of talking about this?
Shame.
Shame. Who said that? Talk about that. Why does shame get in the way?
Well, it's I think it's you don't want to let people down.
Yeah.
And at least that seems to be important in our situation.
Yeah. So as soon as you bring it up, it now becomes this thing to be embarrassed about, right? Now, can I talk about that for a minute? You guys need to challenge yourselves or think this through, and you need to start asking yourself a question. Do you think this is a brain disease or not? Do you think substance use disorders are a brain disease or not? Because here's what I can tell you is if you're able to get in touch with the idea that this isn't about bad behavior, this isn't about, a person being a loser or being, full of shame or full of embarrassment, or I shouldn't let anyone know this. Guys, you got to understand this truly happens to, 10 to 15% of the population cross the line into this. They start using, they have no intention of it going in this direction. They become dependent on it. They become addicted to it. It is what it is. My brain changed. My brain changed. And was I ashamed of that? For years I was ashamed of that. I wouldn't even talk about it. I worked in a treatment center and I wouldn't talk about being in recovery. What changed that for me was really I had to challenge myself and say, what do you think's going on here, Rich? Do you agree with what the world is saying that it's a disease? Do you agree with what the American Medical Association is saying, what the Surgeon General is saying? And if you do, then maybe that can help you get through some of that stigma. Don't get me wrong, it's really hard, guys. I was talking about this before the meeting. This may be the hardest period of time, in my opinion, to raise kids. Now, this is just my take, all right? I know there's people in the room saying, nah, Rich. And my mom would say, nah, Rich, that's not the case. But, and here's why, if you just kind of bear with me for a minute. And again, this is just 100% Rich's theory. So up until the 1980s, like actually my generation was probably the last that was raised this way. Whether or not I was successful was not 100% a reflection on my mom and dad. At a certain point in time, I had to take responsibility for me. And generally, it was, and from an evolutionary standpoint, we are not designed to be coddled by our parents until we're 40 years old. We are designed to be kicked out of the cave and go kill our own stuff. And, you know, and what has happened is at some point in time, it's shifted to where all of a sudden the child's success is dependent on a parent. And so what parents do is they run around, they try to get their kids involved in all kinds of activities. They run around, they try to get their kids involved in the right schools. They run around and they're chasing their tail trying to keep up with the Joneses. And then when addiction enters the picture, it just blows that thing all up. It blows that thing all up. And it's, have you ever, noticed that one of the first things that'll happen when you're talking to another parent is they'll want to tell you what's going on with their kid. They'll want to tell you like so-and-so just graduated from such and such, so-and-so is doing this. Guys, that's not how, my parents didn't do that. They didn't tell their friends, Rich graduated from here, graduated from there. They wanted me to do well, don't get me wrong, but their sense of self-esteem did not depend on my achievement. Parents' sense of self-esteem in today's world depends on their child's achievement. And when did that change? I'll tell you, and if you're out there, you know, in Facebook land, Dr. Spock, with that freak Dr. Spock. Okay? Not the one from Star Trek. The one who wrote the book that basically started telling parents that you had to be friends with your kids and started saying you have to bring up this nurturing environment. Then we took it to a whole nother level with participation trophies and this kind of like vibe where and we literally created this concept called self-esteem. Self-esteem is really not a psychological construct, guys. It's impossible to raise someone's self-esteem. Self-esteem comes from doing good stuff. When you do good things, you feel good about yourself. So what we did was we created a whole generation that had fake self-esteem. We gave them trophies for finishing last, which detracted from the person getting the trophy and the person finishing first. If we're all equal, then no one's special. That kind of thing. And so it's set up, and then it set up this situation. All right, then it's exacerbated by Facebook, Instagram, social media. So then we figured out we could put pictures with Susie with her swimming trophies on Facebook and make our friends feel worse than that way too. Okay? Even though Susie was just trying to assault us with that trophy. Okay? We were just in the minivan on the way home. We had to pull over. I had to give Susie an injection of Halidol to keep her from hurting me with the trophy. But now we're on Facebook, so everybody, look how wonderful the Joneses are. Look how wonderful the Joneses are. And so it creates this incredible sense of shame and inferiority that keeps us from having honest conversations with each other. Back in the day, guys, we used to talk people used to talk about these kind of things over the backyard fence. And you would say, like, I'm worried about my kid or I'm dealing with my kid. We are now in this constant state of trying to, like, keep images up. And it really makes dealing with this particular issue very difficult. Don't get me wrong, I think it makes raising kids in general difficult. You know, I just think it really creates a sense of anxiety. But whenever you mix substance use disorder on top of it and all the worry and all the concern and everything that can go along with that, it makes it, you know, much, much different. So I have a personal vow. And you guys don't have to take this challenge because I wouldn't recommend you follow my lead because in general that's probably bad advice. But when I see somebody at the grocery store and they say, let me tell you what's going on with Johnny, I'm going to say, I don't care, I don't want to know. I really honestly don't care whether your kid graduated from Harvard or whether he's a plumber or whether he's a welder or whether there's no competition with me. You guys win the Great Parent Club. You take the trophy home. I have no Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want the best for our kids. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I, Rich Jones, am pulling out of the competition. I'm pulling out. You guys, not you guys, but they can win. They can have it. They can get to the finish line. It can be all about, and they can, but they're going to have to talk to each other about that. And they're probably going to have to be willing to be publicly ridiculed on Facebook by me because of it. It might be a little bit harsh. So all of that, guys, kicks in this sense of anxiety. It takes this sense of anxiety that's on a scale of 1 to 10. Let's say that you're already at, a 6 or 7. Ask yourself, am I doing a good enough job? Then you mix in substance use disorder, and what? It cranks you to a 12 out of 10 on that scale. So I want you to, if nothing else tonight, I want you, when you're dealing with this issue, and if you're dealing with a loved one's addiction, or you're dealing with a loved one's use, and you're not sure how bad it is, the first thing you can do is step back from the situation and try to assess it in terms of the only important parts of the equation. 1, how's it affecting their health? Is it impacting their physical health and their mental health? Are you guys leaving?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, make sure you come back. All right, this hurts my self-esteem. So, what's it doing to their physical and mental health? Like, that's your most important question. Of course you want to ask things like, is it affecting their legal status? Are they going to get themselves in a hole that's too deep to climb out? I get that part. But do not bring what other people think into the equation. Would you guys agree that it's too much heavy lifting to begin with, let alone to think, what so-and-so is going to think or what are they going to say? And also, I will tell you that a lot of them are dealing with it too. A lot of the people that we think that have the images up, they're dealing with it as well. All right. So a lot of it comes down to when we start talking about your reaction to situations. When we talk about, why do you get upset with a phone call in the middle of the night? When we talk about why do you get upset maybe when a text message isn't returned, it's all about these things called neural pathways, connections in the brain, memories connected to events. So you're spending all night, you're trying to text your loved one, you're trying to get a hold of them, they won't answer the text, and when this happened last time, they wound up in jail. I'm making this scenario up. But what your brain does is it skips all the logical questions and goes from no answer on the text to what? Jail. No answer on the text, jail. No answer on the text, emergency room. No answer on the text, fill in the blank. All these other terrible outcomes. No answer on the text, well, it could be that his phone's dead. No answer on the text, well, maybe he just left it at his friend's room. Do you follow me? Like, those contingencies are out because of these things called neural pathways. Your brain will automatically go to the most familiar result or the most threatening result. And it's really about this thing called System 1 versus System 2 thinking. We have about 77,000 automatic thoughts per day. I got to be honest, I don't know how they know that. I do not know how the psychologists know that. But essentially, these are thoughts that operate below our consciousness. And they really, really influence our behavior at any given time. What do? They influence our mood. They influence the way we interact with people. And it isn't just related to addiction, obviously. It can be related to anything. It usually has a lot to do with our past experiences. And there's 2 different systems, guys. One is called System 1, which is the emotional part of our brain, and 95% of our reactions happen in System 1. System 2 is when we think it through. System 2, that's only about 5% of the time. So the key to this process, the key to managing your anxiety and managing what I would call like a trauma response to dealing with your loved one, is to try to get away from System 1, or the hot system, to the more analytical, cool system. So you have to start figuring out strategies around that. So the first thing is you have to try to develop ways of actually having awareness. Having awareness of the thoughts, paying attention to the thoughts, slowing them down. How do you pay attention to the thoughts? The most common recommendation is you work backward from the feeling. So you almost start asking yourself, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I can't sleep, what's going on? And you try to take this back to what may have triggered this event. Sometimes it's very obvious stuff, guys. If you're home tonight, your loved one comes in and he's smashed, it's very obvious what connected this. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about some of the more subtle stuff that may get you going. Have you ever been in a situation where you're going through the day and you're feeling okay, and then you remember that you should be worried? Has that ever happened to anybody in here? I can tell by you laughing that it has. You literally are like, this was a pretty good day, but they're drinking. I'm worried. So what's triggering you to even have that thought? What's triggering you to go down that pathway and to try to recognize that? Is anybody willing to share any techniques that they have to try to slow their thinking down? And if not, that's okay. But does anybody have any go-to techniques that they use that kind of slow your thinking down, bring yourself back into the moment? Anybody have anything that they use? Yes.
Well, I think it's helpful for my husband and I, if I go there, to have him as a sounding board. And sometimes he cannot go there as fast as I will, and sometimes it's vice versa.
So you share it.
Yeah.
Did you guys hear the statement? Like sometimes it's better they kind of share the burden around the issue.
Help me think through this. What do you think? And we can slow it down and talk it through, and sometimes get into more of that thinking than the reaction. Because I go to the reaction really easily and very fast.
Go to the reaction very fast,
Yeah.
automatically. It's instinctual. And again, the danger with going to the reaction, guys, is that you go into an action mode that you're not really ready to follow through on. This was the constant situation in my family when I was in active addiction and I was married and that kind of thing was, my wife kicked me out of the house 783,000 times, because she would go to system one and have an emotional reaction, and what would she say? You're out. You're out. But the problem was it was never actually thought through. What does that mean if Rich is out? How do we actually do that if Rich is out? Who's going to pay for the apartment if Rich is out? Do you follow me? There's like all these dominoes that require abstract thinking, and you guys deal with it with your kids. Name a scenario. Maybe your child's living with you, and your first reaction when they're doing this is, he's out. But what I'm saying is if you say that too quickly, you're liable to make a really bad decision. Also, probably more importantly, you're liable to make a decision you just simply can't follow through on. You logistically and emotionally can't do it. So take a step back and try to calm down and access system one thinking. What other techniques might work to slow things down a little bit? Anybody else have any examples or ideas? So taking a breath, pausing and taking a deep breath when you're in the middle of the storm. Trying to step away from the situation, and this idea of pausing before you react. Literally, slow is smooth and smooth is quick. We've said this in here before, right? Anybody know what quote? I'll give you $1 million if you can tell me what movie that's from. Slow is smooth and smooth is quick. Somebody Google it. No, it's called Shooter. Mark Wahlberg, man. I think I got a bro crush on Mark Wahlberg. He's the man. So whatever you can do to step back and kind of calm your body down, calm your thinking down, really, really evaluate the situation. Some people would tell you to put pen to paper. Some people would say sit down and start writing out what you see, what your options are in situations like this. There's definitely an advantage to talking to somebody about it. What happens as you talk out loud is, guys, you process the information. Now, you have to talk to the right person. You have to talk to somebody who's not going to be judgmental. You have to talk to somebody who's not going to give you a speech about it. But as you talk about it, you might be able to come to different conclusions. That whole sharing the burden kind of thing, my wife has a tried and true technique, and I'll pass it on to you. I don't personally appreciate it very much, but here's what you do. Your spouse, right before you go to bed, whatever's worrying you, you just say it out loud to your spouse, then you go to sleep and let him worry about it. If you guys need to see this done, I can bring her in here and we can demonstrate it. Oh, yeah, what's going on? Have a good day. Have a good day, yeah. And then she's just literally getting ready to lay down. She's like, I wonder what Elizabeth's up to. She's at Clemson tonight. Good night. I spend the whole night texting. Who are you with? What are you doing? So it's kind of like, tag, you're it, that kind of thing. I do think there is something to the idea of sharing the burden, though. I think it's very hard if one person is trying to answer all these questions, that kind of thing. And you can get whoever else cares about the person, whoever else you can get involved in that conversation. Remember the other thing about worry. The other thing about worry is whenever you're in a worry cycle, you're actually trying to solve the problem. You worry too much. It doesn't do any good. It does for me. 95% of the things I worry about never happen. There's actually truth when they do anonymous surveys around people who have generalized anxiety disorder. What they'll find out is a lot of folks think if they worry about it, it actually prevents it from happening. In some kind of, sort of superstitious kind of way, if I'm thinking about this, really what I believe the reason why people worry is because of the problem-solving function of worrying. The I'm going to figure it out part of it. Now that's where I think if you're talking to somebody out loud, you might get more mileage rather than laying in bed. How many people wake up at night and worry? I do. And I'm not talking about anything just with my kids. It could be related to favor. It could be related to a specific project. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Have you ever had an experience where like you wake up and like boom, it's like your brain is turned on? And if you pay attention to what you're doing in those situations, you're literally, it's almost as if you're trying to figure something out. You're thinking it through and you're wondering, well, if he did this, what if he did that? Could that really happen? And if they did this, that could happen. And if we did this, maybe that would get him back here and we would be able to get him okay. But that wouldn't happen. That could never work because he's work. It's like all these scenarios that you run through your mind. And it's almost like you think you're going to come to some conclusion. And you're going to be okay. Now I have a question for y'all. Has anybody come to that conclusion? Seriously. Because if you have, I want to know how to get there. Because I have never actually come to that conclusion. I have never laid in bed worrying about something, playing it through my mind, and gotten to a point where my mind went, oh, there you go. Captain Crunch. Buy him Captain Crunch. Has nothing to do with anything. There was never an epiphany moment for me in my worry. In other words, I don't know that I've actually productively worried about anything in my life. Every time I've laid in bed from 2:30 in the morning until 5:30 in the morning, gotten up, grinded through the day, nothing was ever accomplished in those worry moments. How do you deal, and let's talk very specifically, and if anybody has any advice, we're all wide open. How do you deal with worry in the middle of the night? Does anybody have any advice for what to do with worry? Carol?
It doesn't always work for me, but I've been doing a lot of worrying at night lately because I'm an oldest daughter, and I think what happens in the middle of the night, like around 1:30 or 2, my defense mechanisms just go away. So when I wake up, I'm very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I have no defense mechanism. They're not in place. So everything comes pouring in. So if I lay there a while and it doesn't work, it's crazy, but I learned this when I was a student nurse.
No, there's nothing. This is good.
He would not prescribe a sedative to any of his patients, but he would write a prescription for milk and salt and crackers.
You're kidding.
No. And so I do that, and I get a book that I've been reading that's totally not related to addiction, and I start reading the book to get my mind off of it and try to let it. Now, sometimes it works great. Sometimes I really have a bad load of it tonight, but usually that'll help.
That is freaking outstanding. Milk and saltine crackers. You heard it here first.
I said, I'm going to my granddaughter. She has it now.
Yeah.
Tell me, you got any saltines? I can't sleep.
Okay, so let's talk about the psychological mechanism around milk and saltine crackers. It's probably not the milk and saltine crackers.
It's tryptophan. It's a chemical.
What's the tryptophan come from?
Milk.
I thought that was almonds and turkey. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Milk, almonds, turkey, and saltine crackers. Okay.
Saltines have carbohydrate, but it increases your sugar level, which causes you to be drowsy. So
Do you think it's also the process of what you're doing is you're kind of interrupting, you're not laying in bed and you're not thinking about it, so that you're getting up and you're kind of going and you're doing something else? So sleep patterns used to be different back in the day. When people would wake up, this is before the Industrial Revolution, when people would wake up, they would just start doing whatever they needed to do. And then they would kind of read, they would work, they would do whatever, they would go out and plow the field, I guess unless it was dark, and then they wouldn't. And then they would go back to bed when they were tired. There was this sort of process and probably what's happening when you're getting up and pounding milk and saltine crackers, you're getting yourself, well, first of all, you're getting all that other stuff you just talked about, but you're also getting yourself out of that zone. Because some people will say, move to a new space. Get out of the bed and go move to the couch would be an example of going to a new space, that kind of thing. Go take a shower, go take a bath. You're doing something to interrupt that process. Now you gotta be careful when you're in that worry cycle. You also can't jump into the other classic things that go along with it, which is looking at the clock and then worrying about not getting any sleep and then worrying about worrying. So now you're worried about your loved one, and then you start worrying about your loved one, and then you start worrying about your loved one, and you're up and you're looking at the clock and it's 2:13, and I have to get up in 3 hours, and then the day is going to be horrible. So now you're spun up, because now it's not only the person you were worried about, it's all the consequences of being worried. So move away, pound some saltine crackers and some almond butter and turkey breasts.
And then I have something to do if that doesn't work.
What?
If I
Oh,
have
okay.
something to do if that doesn't work.
Okay.
Last couple of weeks I did work a few times. So one time I cleaned my closet.
Wow.
One time I cleaned my pantry. And there's one other thing I cleaned. Yeah. And
So,
that did it.
all right, we have a formula.
It is work.
We have a formula.
Go back to sleep.
I want to write this down and see if we can get this patent. Bill, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that she mentioned, and I do that as well, is to read. Just pick up something that's unrelated to whatever it is that I might be thinking about, whether it's worry or not. I'm up, I'm thinking about something.
Yeah.
And then the other I was going to suggest, which is really great, is the Golf Channel. Turn on the Golf Channel.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Turn on the Golf Channel.
The Golf Channel will
Yep.
Yep.
That's right.
2 o'clock.
That's right. Turn on the Golf Channel, and that incredibly stimulating programming will take care of everything. That'll take care of everything. Is there a way, and I think what I'm about to say is a really difficult thing to do, but I know in my life, in dealing with things that I worry about, kids, work, whatever it is, can you get yourself to a point, can you allow yourself some time to figure it out? So in other words, you don't become upset with yourself if you find yourself laying there in bed and you're spending some time figuring it out, but you literally start setting rules around worry. Now I know this sounds strange, guys, but you've heard me talk about this in here before. One of the most effective things to do with worry is literally put it on your calendar. Put it on your calendar and say, I'm going to worry from 7 to 7:45 every night. Another thing to do would be, here I am laying in bed in the middle of the night, and I'm going to give myself the next half an hour to figure this out. And after I'm done, I'm going to let go of this. And so take a minute. Now, Favor, we're multiple pathways to recovery. We are multiple pathways to recovery, and we believe whatever works for you works for you. But one of the tried and true ways to deal with situations that you can't really deal with your loved ones is to use this mental imagery of turning them over to God. And what I would say is what you do is you do it in a way where you give yourself a chance to actually try to figure this out. Okay? You don't deny yourself that part of the process. It's a real thing. That's what human beings do. We try to figure out how to solve the problem. But can you start to work on this idea that you're going to turn your loved one over to the care of God? That it's in your hands. It's in your hands. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to repeat that, guys, in your head over and over and over again. You won't do it once. You'll literally be laying there in bed and saying, it's in your hands. It's in your hands. It's in your hands. I've shared this before. Probably from my mid-20s until I was 31 when I got sober, I thought about using drugs and alcohol every day. I didn't even know it was abnormal. I didn't know. I thought everybody was like that. If I was at work and we were talking, in the back of my mind, I was trying to figure out where the party was. When am I going to get this? How am I going to get this? Especially when these opioids kicked in. When I say it was always there, guys, it was always there. There's not one bit of exaggeration there for me. When I got into recovery, I was taught very early on to say, Dear God, please remove this thought from me. Dear God, please remove this thought from me. Dear God, please remove this thought from me. And I must have said it 10,000 times. And I'm telling you, as true as I'm standing here, now I believe in God, and I believe part of that is God removing the obsession. But even if you don't believe in God, please understand the cognitive rewiring that's occurring when you say that 10,000 times. The new neural pathway that you are plowing when you say that repetitive mantra. Dear God, please take this away from me. Dear God, please take this away from me. Dear God, I turn him over to you. Dear God, I turn her over to you. What you're doing, guys, is, and again, whether you believe that or not, isn't the issue here. The issue is that this is a scientific, physiological, neurobiological fact that if you do that enough, you will literally rewire your thinking. And then what will start to happen is you will be able to turn off the worry cycle a little bit easier. And so rather than just laying there trying to figure out, did they use? Did they not use? What if I do this? What if I do that? What if we do this? What if we go see him tomorrow? What if we don't go see him tomorrow? You do a little bit of that, but then you add to the back end where you're trying to turn it over. That's a suggestion for nighttime worry. One other suggestion that people on a much more kind of like cognitive or scientific tip would be to keep a pad next to your desk. Get yourself up before you go pound the saltine. Write down what you're worried about. Make a note to yourself that you'll pick it up in the morning. There's been a lot of work around the psychological connections with that as well. What other pointers for worry, especially at night? Anybody have any additional pointers for worry? Yes?
For me, just like a mindfulness activity, like if my mind is trying to work a puzzle anyway, why don't I work a puzzle, like a crossword or something like that?
Yes.
Something with, not as heavy a consequence, something lighter.
Something to occupy your mind.
Distraction.
Yep. Find something to occupy your mind. Find something to distract yourself. That kind of thing. Any other final thoughts related to worry? Yes.
Well, I had this verse when my children were younger because I was worrying about what could happen. But it's don't be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. So I try to start giving thanks for the good things.
Oh, that's good.
And one other thing that I just learned not long ago, you start with the alphabet and you think of God when all those intrusive thoughts are coming into your mind. And I guess it's instead of counting sheep, but you say A, God, you're awesome.
Yeah.
B, the beauty of the earth. C, and I almost always go to sleep.
It is the same principle as counting sheep. I don't know if you guys could hear. She goes through the alphabet and gives thanks and expresses gratitude across each letter of the alphabet. It's very much like counting sheep. It's better, though, because it's more specific and it's going to occupy your mind more. What you're trying to do is you're trying to pull your mind off that thing. That thing that has you obsessed in the middle of the night to something else, and then you would more naturally kind of doze off. You would more naturally fall asleep. Did you want to?
Well, two things. I meant to what she said, and I listen to music, but with regard to praying, I've also done the alphabet. If you have a family member that starts the day, you pray for that person. B, what I'm
Yes.
saying? So that's
Yep.
what I do.
You go through it. And again, if you guys listen to these ideas or these principles, what you'll see is there's a common theme. And the common theme is try to pull your brain, pull your mind off of that thing that the issue that you're obsessing with, and move it toward something else with this idea that that's going to distract you from the worry and then your body's natural process of falling asleep. And there's nothing worse than when you're trying to fall asleep to try to make yourself fall asleep. Go to sleep! Damn it, go to sleep! It just doesn't work that way. You can't muscle your way into sleep, right? So, really good stuff. Now, we have to start talking about, what triggers us and what makes it kick in and what's the process. With this, we're sitting here right now. We intellectually all understand this. Everybody in this room gets the idea that we have to try to redirect our thinking. But what happens and why are we so sensitive and why do we tend to go 0 to 60? And it's this idea, this is just a good proverb that indicates what trauma is. Once you've been bitten by a snake, you're afraid even of a piece of rope. So what kind of experiences would contribute to your personal situation that would make you hypersensitive to everything? Past experiences with addiction, right? And remember, these are any past experiences, guys, not just past experiences with who you're currently dealing with. So when I overreacted, and I'm going on the record, and I guess in a way, this is something that I've said a long time ago, but when I overreacted to my son being at the University of Pittsburgh and partying and going at it and stuff like that, and kind of, following in my footsteps a little bit too much than I was comfortable, and I went berserkers. I mean, guys, I did everything wrong. I mean, you got to understand something. I did everything wrong. I pull him out of school for really no good reason. I take his cell phone. I infiltrate people. I take him to meet the commander of the Pennsylvania State Police because he was a really good friend of mine, and he was like a referral partner. I worked in the field. I take him to meet Paul. I make him sit down with Paul, and Paul's like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" And everything wrong. Why did I do that? It wasn't just my personal experience in addiction. It was growing up in a house where addiction was present. It isn't just the immediate stuff. It's everything that's lying there in your mind that does what? That takes you from the fact of the matter to the drastic results that are coming. So you want to start thinking like, what's the piece of rope that triggers you? Many times it won't be anything other than your loved one's experience. I mean, you guys have gone through a lot, and if you've gone through a lot, you don't need anything else. That kind of deal. There's one other thing that'll trigger you guys more than anything in today's world, and it's the media. Now, we can't avoid the media attention around the issues we're facing, that our community faces and our nation faces with drugs, right? We cannot deny that 70,000 Americans died last year, direct result. But you guys got to understand that that's also in your consciousness. You guys have heard all those stories. You've seen all those media episodes. You've seen the 60-minute specials. So you got to remember that's also going to tweak you. Does that part make sense? It's not even just your personal experience. More than ever, and there's no way we can avoid this, guys, and in a way it's good that the awareness has grown, but we are definitely living in a culture where we're all on edge around these issues. Unless you're in complete denial. You're either in complete denial, blowing it out and doing your thing, or you're on edge. So you got to remember that will also trigger you. Trauma simply means a wound, and in this case, it's an emotional wound. Okay? So we're not going to get into that. I'm not going to go through all this. I'm not going to give you the different definitions and diagnostic. I do want to talk about this. This is literally right out of the trauma playbook, if you will. Adverse life experiences. These are all things that have been shown to be traumatic experiences. Not necessarily life-threatening, but life-altering. So I would argue that the first two of these you guys experience. If you're dealing with somebody who's in the middle of this issue, you deal with this every day. Examples include grief and loss, divorce, verbal abuse, bullying, and just about everything else. Addiction definitely falls into this category. Dealing with a loved one's addiction definitely falls into that. And if it's traumatic to you, then it's traumatic, period. So your son or daughter getting arrested is a traumatic experience. The idea that you would just get over it and kind of like set boundaries, stop worrying about it, get over it, it's disingenuous because your brain's not necessarily going to let you do that. Your brain's not going to allow it to go down that way. Does that make sense? It's going to be wired differently because it's a traumatic experience. All right. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the other phenomenon, and you guys can kind of jump in here, and I think this applies to both parents dealing with kids and also spouses, it's grief. It's not grief. There's obviously worry, and it can turn into grief because we lose people to this disease. But really what it is it's grieving a dream. It's grieving what could have been. It's grieving this idea of, here's how I thought this was going to turn out. And, that, again, that's my wife went through that when she thought, we were going to get married and do the white picket fence thing and live happily ever after. She had to come to grips with grieving the dream before she could set boundaries. She had to realize that it wasn't going to go down like that. Now, it all worked out, it's just marital freaking bliss every day. And it all worked out for the best, but it was touch and go there for a little while. And but she had to get in touch with actually, this isn't going to turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. This isn't going to be quite what I thought it was. I didn't sign up for this, that kind of thing. And she had to mourn that process. She had to go through a process in order to get there. I think in some ways that happens with parents to children as well. That it may not quite turn out the way you thought it would be. It might be a rockier road than what you thought. It might be twists and turns and that kind of thing. Here's what I would encourage you to try to do if you're dealing with that. If you're dealing with that aspect of this, remember, and this is just how it is. And anything can happen to any of us right now. I could go tomorrow and I could wake up and go to the doctor and my life could be completely altered tomorrow. I could be diagnosed with cancer. I could get in a car accident on the way home. A loss of a dream can happen in a lot of different ways, right? This is really hard because of the stigma and the shame around it. Losing a dream related to somebody getting off track because of addiction, and they're not going to have the career we thought they were going to have, and they're not going to have the relationship we thought they were going to have, and they're not going to be the father or the mother that we thought they were going to have. That's just another version of any other life-altering event. It just comes with so much damn baggage because of what we've been told. Here's the other thing. Please understand this. If you're going through something right now, it's not over. It is not over. There is no reason why so-and-so can't get it together and have a good life. I don't care if they've been at this for 50 years. I can't tell you the people that I've seen whose life has been absolutely reclaimed, including mine. You would have never... What the hell was a Greenville, South Carolina? What am I doing here? Talking to you wonderful people. How in the world did this happen? There are things on the other side of this that you guys can't necessarily grasp. There are also bad endings. We have to acknowledge that. I can't stand up here and try to blow smoke and act like everything always worked out, because it doesn't always work out. But try not to enter into that super negative, automatically hopeless way of looking at it, because I know it's very hard to avoid that. It's very hard to avoid that. But so I'm making an argument that you're it's not experiencing loss, but it's experiencing loss of a dream. And you kind of have to go through that process and come to some sense of acceptance that it's going to be different and you're going to have to approach this thing differently. Would anyone comment on that? I'm just making that up, guys. This is my take on the world. I don't know if anyone would agree with me out there in recovery land. But what do you guys think? Does it pass the common sense test?
Yes.
Has anyone experienced that, or would anybody be willing to share a journey related to that? And if not, that's okay. Peggy?
Well, we had the journey of our daughter and what we thought we lost.
Yeah.
And that was corrected pretty quickly with the death of her boyfriend.
Yeah. You mean it changed your perspective?
Yes, it changed our perspective.
That's a great, thank you for sharing that. So, that can create a whole different level of loss. You can start getting preoccupied with, they're never going to be able to do this. We thought they were going to be able to do that. Then you have this reality just slap you in the face.
And you're so thankful that she's alive.
Yes.
That you
yes.
kind of forget the grief. Not forget it, but...
Yeah, you become thankful.
It's a different grief.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different type of grief. It's obviously not as tense as losing somebody, but it's there. I believe it's there, and I believe it's something that people have to try to work through and try to accept to a certain level. Would anyone else want to share about that? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like too, if you are going through that or trying to deal with that, you also have to let yourself feel this feeling.
Yes.
So that it's okay to have those feelings too, and not try to beat yourself up because of whatever may have happened.
That's right. Yeah, it's okay. And these are now this is interesting. This is, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's Stages of Grief. Have we all heard these before? By the way, they're a bunch of bullshit. And actually, that's not me saying it. It's the next slide that says it. She just made these up. They never were really actually studied, and they're not meant to be, you go in order through this. But they do provide a framework for understanding what can go on with grief. Whenever you're dealing with the potential loss of a loved one or the loss of a dream, obviously denial, it's not going to happen, everything is okay, this isn't as bad as we thought it was, everything's going to work out, that can be part of the process. Can anger be part of the process? How many people here have been angry? Yes. No. If you didn't raise your hand, y'all, we have to talk after here about your level of honesty. You get angry about it. You obviously get worried and you get sad, but you probably get angry. You know, you get angry at the person. You probably get angry at other conditions around the issue. What does bargaining mean? Bargaining is usually between you and God. Take this away, make this person better, and I'll go become a priest. Yes, take this away and I'll go become a priest. Just one more thing, please make this better. That kind of deal. The depression, they have the word depression. You could just call this sadness. You'll get to a point where you'll just get really down and really sad about the situation. Sometimes it will turn into a depression. Sometimes it can turn into depression, and where you can't get out of bed, where it affects your day-to-day functioning. And then ultimately what you want to have is some level of acceptance around the issue. You want to have some way to kind of get to a point where you're not... Acceptance doesn't mean you're okay with it. Do you guys get that? Doesn't mean you're okay with it. You're not saying I'm cool with so-and-so doing it. It just means you're not going through some of these other massive kind of mood swings and massive feeling states. Anybody want to add anything about the process of kind of going through and accepting the reality of the situation and sort of leaning into it and realizing it's not going to be what you think it's going to be? It doesn't mean it's going to be a bad thing. It's just not going to be what you think it's going to be.
And sometimes you don't know what it's going to be. It might be what you think it's going to be.
It could wind up what you think it's going to be. Many times, especially early on when you're trying to figure this out, this is real important. I'm glad you said that. The other thing is don't try to make conclusions based on incomplete data. Don't try to make conclusions on what's going to go on with your loved one, what is going on with your loved one, unless you have the whole entire story. And the reason I say that is, I'm going to totally make up a scenario. Let's pretend you got somebody, they're in recovery. They're doing what they need to do, and they've been doing okay for 90 days, and they slip up. Somebody comes into town to visit them. They get together. They have a couple drinks. They smoke some weed. Maybe they don't go back to using exactly what they were. What I'm saying is, wait till you see what actually happens before you draw this conclusion that, oh, here we go again. They're right back at it. You want to get all the information. What were the circumstances of it? Is the person going back to a recovery room? Is the person going to work on himself? Do you guys get that? You want to try to, I guess you want to try to save your upsetness for situations to get upset. Does that, and again, when I say that, I don't want to act like it's easy.
Sometimes you think you can beat it to the punch, though. If you get upset before
it
gets bad, you can beat it, whatever's going to happen to the punch.
Yeah, and you can solve it.
Before it even happens.
Yes, you can get on it, that kind of thing. And Margaret's comment was sometimes you feel like you might be able to beat it to the punch. You might be able to do something about this. And that's very accurate. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to try to beat it to the punch, remember to be thinking through how you're going to beat it to the punch. Be
There
thinking.
might not be anything to beat to the punch. That's the whole issue.
Yeah, and there may not be anything there. So, all of this, listen. This is all coming back to one theme. Take a deep breath. Step back. Try to evaluate this situation as rationally, objectively as you can. Start asking yourself, what are my options? What should I do? Remember, sometimes the best thing to do is not do anything. Don't, just stand there. Don't do anything. Yes?
My son was stopped by the police last night, and they took him to the hospital. And I thought, now, what could be worse than this? He's been in 2 rehabs, and he's been clean for probably a year. But when the police picked him up, he had a needle in his hand.
Okay.
So they took him to the hospital. and I thought, this is the worst.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. His friend that he's been friends with since middle school died overnight from addiction, from overdosing.
Do they live here?
Yeah.
Holy cow. Wow.
So, my son did not die.
Yeah.
My son's friend died. One of his best friends died, and his friend was the way that we found out that Riley was doing drugs. His
Okay.
friend's sister saw needles at the house, and the boy said, "That's okay. I don't do drugs all the time. I only do them when I'm with Riley."
Okay.
So the girl called my daughter, and my daughter talked to my son, and then it brought it to our attention.
Okay.
But anyways, he died last night.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. So freaking sorry to hear that. And so, but it's similar to what Peggy said. It changes the perspective on things. I think that's a really great example because sometimes, let's just talk about the jail thing. Let's talk about perspective and complete data in relation to jail. Sometimes if you got a phone call tonight that your loved one was in jail, you would automatically think this is the worst thing ever. But many times it can be the best thing ever. Because it can pin a person down. It can actually keep a person from continuing to do these self-destructive things. Again, really hard to do, but the idea of let's wait, let's evaluate, let's see what happens, let's see what Riley does after this, let's see if we can get him, maybe he goes to a detox again. You start thinking, guys, here's the most honest thing that anybody can tell you. The family has to become so good at dealing with these issues. Because the system, in Favor Greenville, we're trying the best we can, and I promise we will get this right. We will get some type of system where we can actually, we don't want anyone falling through the cracks, but we're not where we need to be with this right now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to arm the family. It's almost like the family has to become mini counselors. And I know that I'm not supposed to say that, because what I'm supposed to say is detach. Step back. Let them hit bottom, and when it gets bad enough, they'll want it, and they'll go get help. You guys know what I think about that, right? I mean, you know that I think that's probably one of the most uncivilized, inappropriate things. Well, most of the time when people say that is they don't even know what they're saying to you. They don't even have anything else to say, so they fill in the blank with just a statement. You got to let them hit bottom because they feel bad, and they feel like they got to say something because you're telling them this story. It's what society has told us to do for, 50 years now.
Well, it was probably truer in our generation because the stakes weren't quite so high as they are now.
Yeah, it could have been truer for alcohol. I still think it's fundamentally wrong. I still want someone to explain to me.
It's like watching a child walk to the edge of a cliff
and hope he doesn't fall off. Yeah, and he says something before he gets there where he says, hey, should I walk over this cliff? Well, we were waiting for you to ask. And now that you ask and you showed your willingness, well, let me ask you a question. Are you willing to listen to everything I say and do exactly what we say? Well, if yes, then we're going to tell you that no, don't walk off that cliff. Go down that path over there. Yes?
Well, it's just so unnatural for a parent. I mean, I can only speak as a mother, but it's absolutely goes against every fiber of your being. And so to say that, when our son was in recovery, I would say to the people, I have no way to process what you're telling me.
Understand that these people who told you that, don't even understand why they're saying it.
Well,
most people in an addiction treatment program who look at you and say, let them hit bottom, they don't even process why they're saying it. It's literally the Rolodex answer to what you tell families. And you want to know something? It's very convenient for the treatment centers who tell you that because they don't have to deal with you then. They don't have to coach families. They don't have to work with families. If I run a treatment center and I tell you that your job is to stay out of it, guess what? I don't have to hire a family therapist. I don't have to make weekly calls. The treatment system is set up for the convenience of the freaking treatment system. Now, I'm sitting here telling you that Favor Greenville, we don't have an answer to this right now. But I will tell you that we're ashamed we don't have an answer to this. And we intend to have an answer. And what it's going to take is manpower and automation. We are going to have to merge We're going to have some type of technological approach where your loved one gets put into some freaking system that is automatic, that is chasing them and automatically reaching out to them, and with coaches supplementing it. That's the only thing I can think of that gets this done, because we can't wait for people to hit bottom. You can't do it. We literally can't do it in this world anymore. And we can't. And so, Favor Greenville, we can't afford a staff of 500. You know, which is, I don't know, is that what it would take? We have 18,000 people enrolled in the program. It would take, 500. But could we develop a system? Have you ever noticed how you get those freaky little emails from like anything you go to? Like Nike's always trying to sell me something. It just automatically comes out. I never asked for any of those things. What if there was a system that we're automatically reaching out to addicts like that? It could be me, my smiling face. It'd be, hey, addict, good morning. My name's Rich. I'm thinking about you. I love you over here at Favor. Come here. Hurry up. We got candy, because we do have candy. We got candy here at Favor Greenville. You got to admit that. Carol?
I think it's important, though, that we remember that we can try and do and offer, and there just comes a point that there's nothing else that we personally can do.
There is always a limit to what anyone can do. Right. And you always got to do, anything you do for your loved one has to go through this filter of, how does it affect me and is it good for me? And that's where boundaries come in. That's where the idea of protecting yourself. So it's very appropriate for anyone in this room to say, I can't continue to do this relationship the way I have. But again, Carol, I want to recommend that people make that decision from an informed, educated, calm place, rather than across the board.
Just throwing up your hands, but
really think it through. Really think it through and understand that it's an individualized situation for all of us. What are the factors that come into whether or not you're going to step back, whether or not you're going to detach? It's things like, how long have you been at this? If you've been at this thing for 20 years, you're probably much more likely to be at a point where you want to step back than if you just started this journey. What's that? Yeah, so, well, I mean, no, I know people that have. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know people, yeah.
Just a comment related to that. One thing that helped me, I think, that I heard in here, I don't know how many times, but is I'll tell my son that I'll support him in his recovery, but I'm not supporting him in his habits.
Yes.
So if you can get yourself to that point, that's going to help you make those decisions. I've been coming here, I guess, a year and a half, almost 2 years now. So, that's what I think you have to get to. When you look back at that, list of denial and all that you had up there, I can pretty much say I probably went through all of that.
Yeah.
I'm probably down at that acceptance now. I went through a grieving process with my son last year and grieved over him like he was dead already.
Yeah.
I've been through all of that, but I'm at the point now where I know he's in his 6th rehab now, down Boca Raton. This is the 6th one. He made the own decision to go. This is all him, not me now. But I have to let him do it, and that's what I can't do it for him anymore.
Right. Right.
He's got to do that.
Yeah,
but I am here supporting him 100%.
And I would say that your ability to say that kind of stuff and do that kind of stuff is part of the skill set that involves dealing with somebody who's actively in this process. You got to learn how to set your own boundaries. You have to learn how to support recovery but not addiction, that kind of thing. You got to learn how to have the conversations, the basic stuff. You got to learn, where do you have the conversations? When do you have the conversation? Who's involved in the conversation? Is both mom and dad involved in the conversation, or is it just mom? Who's most likely to make this be received by the person? What is it that you're asking for from the person? Do you want the person just to tell you more about what's happening? Let's say you're suspicious that they're using again, and you want to not ignore it. So is your objective only to get the information, and then it's not to, like, quote unquote, make them go to rehab? This is what I mean by the skills around the family dealing with this. It's not at all that you go down in flames with your loved one. That's not at all what I mean.
That's why this meeting is so important, and having a coach, so that you have the education and what
No.
you need to make those decisions.
So that you can talk it through, so that you can come here and talk it through, and you can hopefully hear some stuff that helps you think about. Let's just take, for example, let's just walk through a scenario, and let's say that you're worried about the level of use that your loved one's involved in, or you're worried about a relapse. Literally, the things you want to start thinking are not, unless you're at a point where you've been doing this for long enough and you know that you don't want to even know. Literally, it's practical stuff. When are we going to talk to them? Who's going to talk to them? What do I say? How do I even bring it up? Talking here in group and getting this information, or talking to somebody one-on-one about how to have those conversations, that can be very, very helpful. And here's the other thing that happens. After you do it 4 or 5 times, you will become experts on doing it too. And what we would say is what? Mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. And don't talk to drunk people. Those are the rules. Okay? Does that make sense? 3 rules. Mean what you say. Be very clear. Don't try to have a hidden agenda. Don't try to manipulate anybody into anything. Hey, George, I'm worried about, the level of drinking. I understand that boys will be boys, but this is kind of getting out of control. Here's why I'm worried. Just straightforward. Mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. Don't blow them out of the water. Avoid calling people names. Avoid pointing fingers and turning it into a yelling match. And don't talk to people when they're drunk, because you can't talk to drunk people. If anybody here says that they're a drunk person whisperer, I want to know how to do it. It's a circular conversation. And you can also get into things like, what time of the day do we have the conversation? Literally, like, do we have it on Saturday morning? You should set up the conversation. You shouldn't maybe surprise the person with it. You want to be real matter of fact about it. You want to be real straightforward. Hey, you want to say things like this. I love you, and I can't just stand here and act like things aren't happening. I love you, and I'm not going to ignore this. You want to avoid kind of the stuff that has to do a lot with them and focus more on you. Does that part make sense? I can't stand the way I feel when I watch you drink like this. We got to talk about this. Not because I think you're a bad person. Heck, this may not even be a problem. I just can't be part of it. That kind of thing. And get it out on the table. That's the stuff that we would hope that you would learn here while you were coming to this group, and also talking potentially with a coach or anyone else one-on-one. What other comments about that part of the process, guys? What other thoughts? Yes?
If you're not sure, what is the best kind of in-house drug test?
So in-house drug test, you mean like if you're buying it from like CVS or anything like that?
Or Amazon or something?
Yeah. They're all going to basically do the same type of test. I would just get anything. I wouldn't get anything super cheap, but anything other than that is going to get it done. And you want to get a 10 panel? A 10 panel. That's what it'll say. It'll say 5 panel or 10 panel, and you want to get 10 panel.
The police last night told us to start doing it. I said, I've done it once, and they said, once in how long? I said, once in about 6 months. And they said, no. You should really do that more often.
The police gave you advice to do drug testing. Yeah, so the police are trying to come up with answers too, right?
He had no idea. Yeah, I mean, he was very, very good, but he was clueless also. You should get them to start coming.
So we've been working with the police, and we've been get them to come here.
No.
That would be cool. And we've been giving our cards and trying to connect with them and trying to get them to call. Well, you're part of this group, so you already kind of knew where to come to help. But our deal would be, if you didn't know anything, could they give you some information?
Yeah, I mean, they could have recommended me to come here.
Yeah.
If they, because there are 7 policemen.
Yeah.
For one person.
Wow.
And if they don't want to do the drug test, then you don't need to do the drug test.
Yes, refusal to do a drug test basically means positive drug test. I have done so many freaking drug tests, and there's nothing I hate more than doing urine screens. Bye, guys. Yep, you go over to that other meeting. Tell everybody I said hi. All right, I want to get to some... this is a great quote. When tragedies strike, we try to find someone to blame. In the absence of a suitable candidate, we blame ourselves. So you guys, if you're dealing with something, if you can't find anyone else to blame this on, you're going to tend to say, this is my fault. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? What did we do wrong? I want to just get to some of the different things that we can do. Coping skills. All right, progressive. Just some recommendations as you guys deal with this stuff. Just different ideas, and you can jump in here too. What works to reduce stress? Actually, first, let's start here. Is dealing with a loved one's addiction stressful? Okay, dumb question of the night. What works with stress? Progressive muscle relaxation. Does anyone know what that is? Okay, you can go on YouTube and you can get progressive muscle relaxation exercises. You can get a guided process. You could probably do it on the App Store. It's literally a process, squeezing your muscles, releasing your muscles. And they'll talk you through it, squeezing your muscles, releasing your muscles. That kind of thing. It's anything that allows you to move that process through your body. That's been shown to be very helpful when it comes to stress. What about breathing? Breath work. Focus on your breath. When you're in a very upsetting situation, when you're in a very stressful situation, what happens is your physiology, it rises. The anxiety level goes up. Many times you can kind of redirect that through your breathing. Pressure points or tapping. I am not an expert at this. This is not my thing. But there are therapies that literally tell you. Has anybody ever had that done?
No, you can press this.
So it's acupressure, not acupuncture. Okay.
I had a real bad migraine.
Did it work?
It made me hurt. Made me forget about my headache.
So with this weirdo pressing on my hand. And my favorite, yoga. Clearly, as you can tell. I've never done a moment of yoga in my life. But I believe in it. I believe in it for sure. Imagery is this process, and you can get guided imagery online for sure. There are different exercises. It's this process of where you bring positive experiences from your past, or even you imagine positive experiences being at the beach, and you bring it into your consciousness, into your awareness, and there's usually somebody kind of reading the tape and taking you through it. That has also been shown. Anything that incorporates the body in a positive, adaptive way, even going for a walk once a day, getting out, going for a run, anything you can do to get moving. We've talked in here about the free 3 that have been shown from a research standpoint to reduce stress. Laugh every day. How can you get yourself to laugh? What's your plan for getting yourself to laugh? YouTube freaking videos. You can go on there and you Google something, it'll make you laugh. Laughter literally changes your physiology. The other thing is listen to music. Listening to music changes your physiology. And then the final thing is spend some time outside. And if you can't go outside for an extended period of time, go out and walk around your office building. Just get out and get moving. We talked about progressive muscle relaxation, breathing we talked about. They're going to go through a lot of these. I'm not going to get into this. What about other types of relaxation? What about this aromatherapy thing? Carol in the back of the room says aromatherapy works. What's your favorite type of candle? Cinnamon scrub?
No.
Lavender scrub. Lavender scrub and saltine crackers. So are you you're more into essential oils than you are the candles?
Yeah.
Okay, so so the idea there, and I don't know enough about this, I need to learn more about it, that pleasant smells that smells that remind you of things.
Positive association.
Will positive association. It'll take you back to other moments, that kind of thing. And it'll give you a sense of well-being and a sense of peace. So if you haven't tried that, we would recommend that you try that. I haven't tried that. Does anyone else have anything to say about aromatherapy, that end of it?
It's not a silver bullet, but it does.
It does help?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have a friend, she's actually, her husband was died suddenly in an accident at 48. And all of her friends, her best friends came over and rubbed her feet every night with oils.
Did she report that it helped?
Well, I mean, it helped. It was very, still grieving. I mean, it's been like a year.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, it was just something kind of unusual that
Yeah.
you don't see in our days, maybe in biblical days, but not
Yeah.
something that would be common for our friends.
Hey, look, what you're doing is, you guys are trying to say to yourself, what can I do about this situation? And the number one thing that you could do would be able to get a magic wand and take it away. All right? If that's not going to work, you now have to start asking yourself, how am I going to live through this situation? And I'm all about essential oils, and I'm making fun of it, and I'm picking on Carol about the cinnamon toast crunch and that kind of thing. But I'm all about it. But in order for any of this stuff to work, you actually got to try it. You'd actually have to try it. You'd have to say to yourself, for the next 30 days, I'm going to make sure that I laugh, listen to music, and get outside. And what you're working on, guys, in the classic family recovery sense, you're working on yourself. You're trying to take your stress level down so that you don't lose your mind while you're trying to help your loved one not lose their mind. But it's going to take discipline, and it's going to take actual application to get that done. Obviously, with the touch and tactile stuff, it's like lotions would fall into that, the essential oils. Have you ever seen those stress balls that they have that you can roll around in your hands? What are these freaking little fidget spinner things that they have? Those are just clearly a scam, right? That's a way to get kids to buy things that you can step on in the middle of the night. So, all these different things. Mindfulness is actually trying to bring your awareness to whatever task you have at hand. How many people have woke up in the morning, worried about their loved one, got in the car, driven to work, and not even remember the drive? Just get out of the car when they get there, walk in, and they're so checked out and their mind is so occupied on the issue that they just drive straight. It's like they're on automatic pilot. Mindfulness would be this effort of trying to actually pay attention to what you have in front of you. Pay attention. And it'll relieve stress because it'll take your mind away from the worry. Acceptance, we already talked about. It's all over recovery. 12-step recovery is all about it. Radical acceptance. I remember learning the concept of radical acceptance in like 2001 when I worked for the psychiatric hospital. It's literally this idea of you practice just 100% telling yourself this message over and over again. I just accept this for what it is. I just accept this for what it is. It's this mantra-based process of radically accepting and not trying to change anything at all related to this situation. It's again, easier said than done. All right. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the different therapies around trauma processing. I believe this is a different way of looking at this issue. And I believe that if you can focus on trying to manage it from that perspective, then what you can do is you can try to lower your stress, lower your anxiety. I would start tonight, guys. I wouldn't rely on this issue just going away for your peace of mind. Do you guys follow me? Don't rely on the idea that your loved one gets better and then you'll relax. Because you're hanging way too much on that process. The idea would be, can you find a way to relax a little bit, feel a little better, even if they're not doing better? Obviously, we're going to do everything we can to help. You're going to do everything you can to help. It is what it is to try to help them get better. But the key to this is, so you don't lose your mind, you're going to do okay on any given day, regardless of what's going on with that person. And so these are just techniques and just different things to try. A couple final points. One, try to do something fun every once in a while. When you look at positive psychology and you look at happiness and things like that, you know, it's okay for you guys to go out and do something absolutely, not a task-oriented fun kind of thing, not a volunteer at favor fun kind of thing, like a paintball, skydiving, zip line fun kind of thing. Go out and do something fun, or go see a movie, one of the two. Go out and do something fun and really try to like kind of disengage from the process. Man, I'll tell you what, my wife and I, this just happened this weekend because there's some things going on. Things aren't where I want them to be. My kids this, kids that. You guys know how I roll. And, you know, all we do whenever there's a problem with one of our kids, all we do is talk about the problem with one of our kids. That's all we talk about. Hey, what do you think if this happens? Oh, I don't know. What do you think if that happens? Well, we could do this. Well, we could do that. You know, and then all of a sudden I start talking to it authoritatively because I'm the expert. So try to talk about other things. Talk about the weather. Talk about the Clemson game. Talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger's issues. There's a lot to talk about there.
Not as much as the Giants.
If you're not careful, this particular subject will suck up every minute of every day. It will become the only thing. It'll be like this huge kind of thing in the middle of your family. So try to work hard on keeping it in perspective and pushing it down. All right. Yes, Ralph.
Can you give us a brief overview of the Nicholtown program that we have planned?
Yes, sir. So so this Saturday we had our recovery rally at Nicholtown Missionary Baptist Church. So Pastor Blue and I got together probably about 8 weeks ago, and essentially formed a framework for a partnership. We will be opening an office there. We will be providing recovery meetings in the basement of the church and also at the Phyllis Wheatley Center. And we will be providing everything that we're providing there, we're going to provide in Nicholtown. So it's a whole different service line. I've had some people who were willing to come forward and fund that particular service line to serve that community. So it'll be everything, Ralph, that we do. It'll be all recovery meetings, one-on-one coaching, crisis support. It'll be family programs. We know it won't go exactly as it went here, but you got to remember, when we first did this group, there were 8 people here. So we believe that if we go and we start showing up and we start doing what we do, that there's no reason to believe it won't grow the same way. But what it is it's a satellite location. It's not those folks got to come up to Woodruff Road to get services. Because here's what I'll tell you guys. That is a 100% unserved community. There's nothing down the block. And when you want recovery, you don't need to go get on a bus and take 2 or 3 buses to go get recovery. You don't want to do it to begin with. So how in the world are you going to go jump on a bus and go somewhere and go get recovery? So we're going to, that's the project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it's almost perceived here that we're kind of segregated from them.
No, and it's completely unfair. We were never trying to do that, but it's a perception issue, and you know, what it really is it's an access issue. It's when people want to get help needs to be readily available, and for some people, the access issue, like with transportation, for example, is completely 100% overwhelming, and it's enough of a reason to say, screw it. I'm not going to do that. Yes?
Just a comment. I mean, that model, as far as engaging with the churches, because we have churches on every corner in every city that I know of around here. If we could somehow engage with the churches just like that model that you're doing, I mean, I'm talking maybe later on to see how that goes, but I could see if addiction's touching everybody in some way, every church has got to have somebody in it.
No, I think that there's a lot of potential, and the great thing about it is it really kind of comes down to, guys, the model of Favor Greenville, where we were able to step out in faith, honestly. Literally, guys, when I started here, the advice I got from my colleagues is, you know, let me know when you need another job, Rich, because that's not going to work. People are not going to give to a community center that helps drug addicts. That's literally what I was told. You better start charging people. You better find a way to access insurance money. There's no way in the world that anybody's going to do this. No one told me it was a good idea. Nobody in my field told me it was a good idea to do free services. But what we have found is not only will people support it, a lot of people will support it. And also what that allows us to do is go to churches and get in the church basement and, you borrow the church's office and make phone calls. And guys, we're going to have somebody in the congregation at Sunday services who's going to meet with people there on the spot. Now, you're not even allowed to think about doing that in the regular world. Yes.
I'm the one that sent you the question about how that comes up with the question about Northern Greenville County.
Yes.
That is totally an area that is untouched. I could bring a truckload of people down here on any day we wanted to come.
Yeah, we got to figure out a way to branch out and do more, and we're going to work very, very hard at that. Very hard at that. All right. Good questions. Let's take a second here and see, is there anything else I need to answer, guys? Outstanding. Very good group. Glad we talked about a lot of important stuff tonight. We established some ground rules. The most important of which is saltines and milk. Do not forget that. And we will be back here next Monday. It'll be a little bit of a different group. What we'll do is we're going to kind of have the chairs circled up, and it'll be an open discussion. It won't be an educational session. So if you haven't checked that out, we would encourage you to come check that out as well. So if we could we get a moment of silence, please, for those still suffering with this disease, and for the family members brought into this no choice of their own, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right. Amen.